Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Banaz Mansouri. I'm a senior attorney with the Unemployment Law Project. The Unemployment Law Project has been around since 1984. We are the only freestanding legal aid organization in the country solely dedicated to unemployment. The Unemployment Law Project provides free legal advice and counsel and free legal representation to people in Washington state who have been denied unemployment benefits or whose award of benefits have been challenged. We thank you for joining us today for our weekly webinar, which occurs every Monday at noon, with the exception of next week. We will be taking next week off and we will reconvene on January 4th. The purpose of today's webinar is to share the latest news on unemployment benefits, which I'm sure Anne has plenty of news to share, and to answer your questions. Please drop your questions in the Q&A box and we will get to them as we can throughout the webinar. And I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. From the Unemployment Law Project, Executive Director John Tierpak, and Staff Attorney and Policy Director Ann Paxton. I will now turn it over to you, Ann.
Thank you, Banaz. So the big news today, as probably most everyone has heard, is that masses of people who are receiving unemployment benefits have been pulled back from the edge of the cliff, which was going to be December 26th. At least if everything is on track in Congress, there is a bipartisan stimulus bill that should get passed later tonight. They have till midnight, so there was quite a lot of there were quite a few details to work out because the stimulus bill, which continues a lot of aspects of the CARES Act, was being passed at the same time as the spending bill to keep the government open. So they had dual tasks to get accomplished. We have every belief that this is what is going to be enacted. The agreement is that all the pandemic unemployment assistance programs are extended by 11 weeks, so they go into March. That includes the PUA program, the general pandemic unemployment assistance, as well as the PEUC, which was the extension for regular benefits that have been exhausted. Starting with their expiration at the end of December, there's some slight differences from the prior program under the CARES Act. Under that program, for example, benefits, overpayments of PUA benefits were not waivable. So even if the state had made a mistake, then the claimant was going to have to pay back an overpayment. This bill fixes that, so there's no more ban on a waiver. And that doesn't mean that people will automatically get a waiver. And in fact, most states have very modest percentage of waivers of overpayments granted, but at least there is that possibility. So that's some progress from having no possibility at all. There was a lot of insistence on the part of the Republicans to have a phase out of the program instead of another situation where there's a kind of a cliff where a whole millions of people are going to fall into poverty, basically, with their benefits cut off. So there is some kind of gradual phase out, but I'm not clear on the details on that. There is apparently not a hard date when the jobless, the benefits, the extension is going to end. There is also, in addition, a $300 payment that's similar to the PUC payment that we had last, up until July 31st for 4 months. That was $600. What the extension provides is $300 a week from the end of December into March 2021. And there's a lot of other provisions as well, including, this is basically a $900 billion package that is going along with more than $1 trillion. It might be $1.5 trillion for the renewal for the government spending bill. They're going to revive the Paycheck Protection Program, which provided a lot of revenue for small businesses in the form of forgivable loans, to continue employing people. So that has made a contribution to keeping people working. And there's also these are not final because the bill hasn't been technically passed yet, but there's also scheduled to be $1 billion for state systems for technology modernization and fraud prevention. So we will get final confirmation tonight at midnight as to whether the government is going to remain open and whether the benefits programs will continue. But ESD has said several times that they're very, very certain that these are the provisions that will be taking effect. So the other big news this last week was about one of the 5 audits that the state auditor is conducting relating to the performance of the Employment Security Department. This one had to do with the $600 million fraud that occurred. And what the audit found was they ascribed a lot of blame to the Employment Security Department for failing to fix a software vulnerability that contributed to the theft of the $600 million. And they also were very critical of the Office of Financial Management for misstating and underplaying the potential impact of the fraud on the state's budget. They said that much of the stolen money that came from the amount of stolen money that came from the state's own coffers was really the largest known theft of public money in state history. So according to ESD, it has recovered about 357 million of that, but there's 243 million still outstanding, although efforts continue to recoup that. The commissioner said in response to the audit that many of the provisions that the auditor is recommending have already been implemented at the agency. But it's significant that there was an earlier revelation that the auditor had been critical of the department for its delays in supplying information about the fraud. And also on last Wednesday, ESD disclosed that there were actually a higher number of fraudulent unemployment claims, usually filed by imposters, than it had said originally. I think the numbers, it was approximately 41% higher than the numbers they'd originally estimated. They're saying there were known, suspected, or probable fraudulent claims of 122,000 that stole this $600 million, of which, as I mentioned, quite a bit has been recouped. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some issues that have been discussed with advocates and others by the Employment Security Department about potential new claims processing, which is one of the most difficult aspects of applying for benefits these days. And in addition, about the handling of calls at ESD and its staffing levels. And there's a lot of quirks in the way that these benefit programs have played out, that claimants who are on the receiving end of these quirks and anomalies of the claims processing are suffering a lot. But in some cases, there aren't huge numbers of people, but in some cases they're actually barred from getting the benefits, and not for reasons that make sense, but for reasons that have to do with problems with the software, with the technology, the IT installation. One of these is PEUC. We've actually had several calls from claimants who have been confused by notices they've gotten about how to apply for PEUC and what is the nature of this strange attachment that the PEUC in many cases has to an old claim. This is an issue that about a subset of claimants have encountered, according to ESD. They were people who already had existing claims that were still alive, that is, they were still active. And their PEUC was attached to an older claim, not to their newer claim. And as a result, they weren't getting the benefit that they might have been eligible for. And this involves a couple of thousand people who were affected. Right now, ESD says that it's implementing a technology upgrade that will try to fix this on a what they call a go forward basis. But that doesn't necessarily address the people who have already had this PEUC attached to their old claim. They can't get benefits right now. And strangely enough, ESD has said there is actually no manual workaround available for this. So this is kind of a little bit of a paralysis on this one issue. So we don't know what's going to happen with that, but we do know that ESD has mentioned in several different contexts that the proprietary software of the IT system has created some of these types of obstacles and making solutions somewhat difficult to implement. This is one reason why the ESD has been expanding its staff, and it has emphasized that it's still hiring customer agents in order to answer the phones, to keep up with adjudications and so on. They're worried, the agency is worried that this is going to bump up against implementation of this brand new act, even though it's somewhat of an extension of the PUA and PEUC programs that were in existence. There are a lot of new provisions with the $300 add-on. And in addition, there's not going to be any retroactive application of this PUA extension. So that's another difference from the system that was in place. But they say they have expanded the team dramatically and have dispensation to expand even more, and have asked us to advise people who are looking for work that they have openings at the department. So they did comment on what is the problem that caused the potential new claims fiasco, which is a basic communication gap that was created by a problem that arose because people were in the wrong benefits program, essentially. But the message that was given by ESD was something on the order of called potential new claims, implied that people had maybe an opportunity for another claim, and not that they needed urgently to answer questions that were being asked by ESD in order to get their claim straightened out. This was many people who were on PUA, but they should, because later information came in, for example, from an employer showing that their hours in the prior year, 2019, actually got them to the threshold where they qualified for regular benefits. So what happens there, that triggers a process where you really can't be getting the PUA, and you might be disqualified for some months that you've received it, and get an overpayment. Unfortunately, even though in many cases, when you are put into the correct program, it will be a wash or close to a wash. There may be some small difference in the amount of the benefits for the different programs. But in most cases, that overpayment would not actually be something coming out of people's pocket. There were 26,000 people that got this notice about the potential new claims, and about 13,000 who didn't respond to it for a variety of reasons. And what they're hoping now is, with this new possibility of a waiver in the bill that is expected to pass tonight, there will be a possibility, if you're receiving PUA money, that you will not be charged an overpayment. So that, although that's going to add another wrinkle that has to be implemented and adds a lot of administrative time, that will save a lot of people from getting, it has the possibility of saving a lot of people from getting an overpayment, having to pay an overpayment where they've already spent the money, and it's really nothing that can be ascribed to their fault. The department says that it's been trying to emphasize that people should basically appeal their overpayment or the cause of their overpayment, and then request a stay of the overpayment notices and collections. So they're trying to work with the people who have filed those appeals In some cases, they won't go to hearing, we've been told, because they're trying to intercept them before that's necessary. And we hope that happens, because the backlog of appeals at the Office of Administrative Hearings is so severe right now. Even when that office gets an appeal from ESD, and that's already taking several weeks, in some cases months, it will take 2 or 3 months in many cases for that appeal to be scheduled. So they are saying that that is unfortunately going to continue happening for the time being. The employers report every quarter to ESD. So you may have an overpayment not only for one quarter, but maybe for the next quarter as well. And this is a very unfortunate thing that's causing a lot of people stress. But what happens is it changes people's categorization, and they need to file a new claim. Another issue that the Employment Security Department is working on is a quirk that is in state law that requires that if you receive a retirement payout that is in the form of a lump sum, state law requires that that be amortized in terms of the amount of money that can be deducted from your benefits. So this is affecting several thousand people. If you receive a lump sum, state law requires that you report it, and what the state will then go through and calculate a deduction from the weekly benefit amount that is based on an amortized amount. Then, and the adjudicator, in order to do this, has to calculate your life expectancy and what amount you would expect to get weekly over the course of a person's life. So about 3,500 people were affected by this, and right now there's 700 people that are being prevented from getting any benefits now because of this this state law that requires the amortization of the deduction. So that's blocking their payment, and they're working on it. And they are trying to change the law. And ESD stresses that it is hiring a lot of new people. They ask for help in reaching out and recruiting people. They've authorized ongoing hiring for their customer service. And they're also hiring dual language specialists. This is one of the programs that's been recently implemented to help people with limited English proficiency. In terms of the call volume, that has been a chronic issue this year. Really, the call hold times were not as bad in the last few years until the pandemic hit. And with the CARES Act and implementation of all these new rules, people were getting constant all circuits busy notices. And this is something that ESD is able to point to some statistics showing that those numbers are improving. They're still not great. But at the beginning of the crisis, they divided incoming calls into two divisions. Two systems. You could call in and ask questions, or you could call in to work with your claim. And they had that till September. And that was when people were saying, "Oh, I have to be switched from a tier 1 operator to an agent to a tier 3," and then their calls got dropped. That was because they were switching from one phone contract to a different contractor, and that caused a lot of people to be dropped, which was a pretty distressing outcome. But the number of calls being dropped now has dropped significantly because they reconsolidated into a single phone system. That doesn't mean that every other problem has been solved or is even really being addressed very quickly. They have shown an improvement in their first call resolution rate, and they have these scheduled callbacks, which are not being fully used. There's about 500 callbacks available a day, and there was quite an overload on callback. The need for callbacks at the beginning, but now there usually seem to be fewer than 500 callbacks being made. And they are trying to balance the need to upskill their staff, at the same time to get as many staff out on the phones as possible in order to handle the demand. So their whole time has been following to a degree, and it is now down to, and probably people remember a few months ago we mentioned that there was the advice for people was, be sure if you're on the phone on hold to press any button on your keyboard on your phone in order to keep from being cut off, because after 3 hours, that's what would happen. So now their average wait time is closer to 45 minutes. That is for people who speak English proficiently. And the maximum is about, the maximum wait time for that line is about 1 hour and 26 minutes. It's a little bit longer average hold times for people who are limited English proficiency. So what they have done is tried to increase their training to what was frequently given to the tier 3 agents, which is not just a couple of weeks training, but 6 to 7 weeks for them to be able to answer what they call mid-level questions. And they're hoping that will be more effective handling of these calls. And because there's so many complexities in these issues that are coming down, what they're thinking right now is how to implement this legislation and the relief of overpayment. It's going to be very confusing to a lot of people, because it does not mean you automatically do not have to pay back the overpayment if there is one. And remember, for many of these potential new claims, there won't be an overpayment, or will be very small. But they're worried about it's going to be difficult to communicate to people that what equity and good conscience means, because the waivers are only available in cases of financial hardship. And the rule is that you have to show in equity and good conscience that an overpayment should be forgiven or waived. So that's kind of the current challenge at ESDs, especially by midnight tonight, when they're expecting that this bill will pass and the waivers will be available, but that doesn't mean they will be automatically granted. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. One of our crack attorneys on our staff, Hunji Lee, did a very interesting PowerPoint on this week for our staff on overpayments and what can cause them. And she has many examples of the very confusing notices that have been going out that are inexplicable in many cases, even to the attorneys on our staff whose full-time job it is to try to make sense of these and advise people on them. And there's some new wrinkles that I did not even know about, but basically the message I wanted to just stress, and this is only a tiny part of Hunji's PowerPoint, was that there's always a determination that is the basis of the overpayment, but it's very hard for people to find sometimes. And ESD has told us that a lot of times these notices get vaporized on the person's SAW account. You can't find them. But you need to know what the basis was in order to really file an effective appeal. Another instance another cause of overpayment can be that you lost a hearing and the agency has been informed and it now sends you a notice saying you lost your hearing about the denial, your benefits are still denied. And as a result, here's how much you owe. As I mentioned, potential new claim is another area of significant overpayments. Failure to respond to questionnaires, that is the reason why many potential new claims issues arose, and overpayments people were hit with overpayments just because they may have gotten a new job, they didn't understand what potential new claims means, which none of us do, and as a result they got an overpayment. And there's another source of confusion is there is a difference between the overpayment detail that you get saying here's what you got every week and it adds up to a certain figure, say $8,000, when you get the detailed billing statement, however, it includes the PUC payment if you receive that. So that adds $600 a week. So it could be $8,000 in the overpayment detail, but when you get the bill, it's $12,000. That is an extremely stressful experience for people. Another thing is another new problem is a false paid in full notice that says you owed zero, but it's not true. And we're trying to figure out what is the source of this glitch that is also causing additional stress. Much more going on with overpayments. This is an area that we're spending a lot of time thinking about and working on, and we hope we can get more clarification to you about that. But the main news today is that the cliff that we've been talking about, everything has to happen by December 26th. That has been extended, so there is more time to breathe, and people will not be falling off that particular cliff right now.
Wonderful. And thank you for that plethora of information. And it is nice to take a little bit of a sigh of relief. One question that came in, are the benefits for PUA, the overpayments that are being waived, is that just for benefits that are paid out after December 26th, or will that waiver potentially apply for benefits that were paid out before?
That the wording that that I have seen, but again, this can't be guaranteed until the bill is actually passed, is that it would apply to anything. It would be in effect just as if it had been in the original CARES Act. However, just remember, from the wording of that question, I just want to make sure, get this warning across. It does not mean that you will get a waiver. It just means that waivers are available. It's up to the states applying their own standards, equity and good conscience, and financial hardship to result in an actual waiver of the overpayment.
Great, thank you. If someone had been filing for UI and it's being denied, and they finally get moved to PUA in a few months after having had a hearing, will the PUA payments be retroactive for all of the interim months and the months that they had been applying for UI?
PUA payments are retroactive to the first date that the person would have become eligible for PUA, which means that you have to be unemployed, partially unemployed for directly related to a COVID reason. So it can't be a sort of peripheral relationship between your being unemployed and COVID. It has to be something like an infection in the family of you or a family member you have to take care of, something like that, where a daycare center closed because of COVID, having to do with a quarantine or state order of restrictions, something like that. They're not 100% clear standards, but once you are in the general area, if you lost a job through no fault of your own, you were laid off, which means you could potentially qualify for regular benefits and won't need PUA. In that case, you have to apply for regular benefits.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions related to PEUC and PUA. One, can you clarify what PEUC means, and how does one go about applying for PUA and the extension? And I'll turn it over to you, but I will also say I'm going to provide a few links in our chat on how that process can move forward. Go ahead, Anne.
Thank you. And if you have any clarification on what I have to say about this, please weigh in, because I'm really shaky on the actual application process. But pandemic, PEUC stands for Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And that was part of both the CARES Act, and it will be part of the extension as well. This is a benefit available for people whose regular UI benefits, unemployment insurance benefits, have been exhausted. They've hit their 26 weeks. And they could have actually done that when the CARES Act was passed. You could have, anybody who had an exhausted claim after starting July of 2019 could qualify for PEUC. So that's been extended. In terms of applying on your actual interface with your SAW account with e-services, those pop-up messages do you want to apply for PEUC? That is, we've been trying to clarify, and I think ESD has been working on this too, that this is a little bit of a software glitch on the way to applying for PUA. Lavina Staten, one of the attorneys on our staff, did a TikTok about this. It's very distracting to see a notice saying, do you want to, after you've been denied regular benefits, do you want to apply for PEUC? Why would you do that when you don't even have regular benefits, so you have nothing to exhaust? But if you say no, you won't get to the PUA application. So they may have been working on fixing this, but the latest we've heard is it's still an issue. So you do need to be denied regular benefits in order to get PUA. You do need to, if you have exhausted regular benefits, you do need to apply first for PEUC in order and be denied for that. And then in some cases you may still qualify for PUA. But the road to PUA has a lot of steps where you need to be denied other benefits first. And because PUA is kind of the benefit of last resort, your entitlement of last resort.
Great, thank you. And I agree with all of those recommendations. And I would say it is a windy and bumpy road to PUA, but stay the course. Answer all the questions honestly. Even if you don't think it applies to you, say that it doesn't apply to you, and the system will continue to move you forward. But do check the links in our chat box. And there is a question about whether the links that we're providing are archived on our website. They're not at this time. We can certainly explore that. My only reluctance is that sometimes those links end or they get changed, and it's not very feasible for us to keep updating our website. So I would say if you can copy and paste the links from this chat, then you can also reach out to me specifically, and I'm happy to provide you with updated links. Okay, we have a claimant whose UI benefits are running out she says her benefits are running out 12/26/2020 and only has enough benefits for 2 more payments. They're not sure if they qualify for PUA, so what shall they do? I'm guessing they might be on UI, but let's maybe give some context specifically around what you were saying about PEUC.
So now that the CARES Act has been a version of the CARES Act is being extended, the first option would be PEUC. That's right now, that's set according to, right now that's 13 weeks of additional payments. Then once you exhaust that, then there is the option of extended benefits, which right now is an additional 13 weeks. That varies, the length of that, the maximum length of that varies according to the unemployment rate. So first would be PEUC. Was there another part of that question?
No, that's it. Thank you. And it was UI. The claimant was collecting UI. So now they will apply for PEUC in the hopes of receiving extended benefits. We have a participant who still has PEUC money left over at the end of this year. Would that money automatically carry over into next year? And at that point, when that expires, would they apply for extended benefits?
That's a good question, because the problem with this bill is that it does extend a lot of features of the CARES Act, but it's not exactly clear how it's going to be implemented. Does it mean that if you had benefits left at December 26th from the federal programs, will they carry over? We don't know yet. I'm hoping it will, but we need to wait for confirmation on that.
Yes, as you go to apply for PEUC, if you don't see the link for PEUC in your ESD account, apply for PUA, and that often will start the process for PEUC first. That is what I've heard from claimants before, and that's what I understand is still occurring. And also call ESD. I know that sounds like a hardship, and I get that, but I have been hearing from claimants, like Anne suggested, they are answering their phones more frequently, and I have heard that if you call first thing in the morning around 8 a.m. tends to be a little bit better opportunity to receive an actual live person on the other line.
And I can say Monday is a terrible day to call. If you look at their stats, the other days are trivial compared to Monday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, we have a claimant whose place of work was closed temporarily due to COVID, but when it was reopened, they were not asked back. How do they answer that question when applying for PUA or PUC?
This is an instance where it might be a layoff that would qualify you for regular benefits. So it's not a guarantee that you would qualify for PUA. But yeah, just say you were laid off, you were unemployed because your employer closed. If they didn't ask you back, from your perspective, that is closed.
Right. I would agree with that. John, do you have any insights?
A common, problem, because unfortunately, as Ann said, they use the word, is your business or where you work closed? And so many businesses are in gray areas in terms of partial closure, intermittent staff on call, things that are not black and white. The business closed permanently and jobs are gone permanently. So, when applying, accurate information, if you have sufficient hours and it's again considered a layoff for you, even if the business closes, if the business isn't permanently closed for everyone, you should qualify for regular unemployment. However, if there are not enough hours or if there's some glitch there, then you should qualify. You should apply for and qualify for the pandemic, because the closure that led to the original layoff is pandemic related.
Okay.
Wonderful. There are no additional, oh, here we go. I was told that not having childcare because daycare is closed due to COVID counts for PUA, but I've been denied PUA because the adjudication person asked if I'm available and able to work from home full-time. I said that I'd still need daycare because my child is young and someone has to watch her while I work. I called and asked for them to reconsider and look at it again, and the answer they were given is that it was forwarded on to a hearing. Is that a reason to be denied PUA because you say you can't work from home because you need to provide care for your children? I feel like these are all trick questions, which I don't disagree with the claimant, but what advice can we provide?
Yeah, it's very tricky. It's important to remember, under regular UI law, that is pre-pandemic, and it will be post-pandemic, there's only 11 good causes for quitting a job. And that means that if you have, and one implication of that, having a conflict with childcare is not one of those reasons. That means that you won't be considered available to work if you have childcare issues. And this is something we've been working on for several years to try to get some relief for people, the many hundreds of thousands of people who are caregivers in the state. And if they turn down a job or refuse a job that involves their customary hours, and in many cases that's 24 hours a day, they will not be considered available. So that's a real problem. Now, some of that's been alleviated with people who qualify for PUA, because the definition of availability under PUA is different. It means, are you available for work if it were not for COVID? But under normal rules, that is not the case. You are considered not available if you have childcare issues. So this is a trick question, as Benas said. We'll have to wait to get more details on what's happening with that appeal. But right now there isn't much option beside appealing.
Right, thank you. Are extended PUA benefits automatic?
They're supposed to be, but you should. It's really helpful to be aware. I mean, go to the website and read up on extended benefits to make sure that you're given that option. You're supposed to apply for a claim when your claim is exhausted at 26 weeks, and they're supposed to segue into extended benefits. So that doesn't guarantee that it will happen, but you should insist on that, because it sounds like you should qualify if you've got an exhausted claim of regular benefits, and if you're still considered available to work.
And good general advice for everyone is, if you are that you should keep claiming, even if you think your claim is going to be exhausted, or there's a question about your claim, or there's a new adjudication going on. Keep claiming each week, answer the questions, because even if you don't receive payments immediately, if things are resolved in your favor, it will be easier to get the payments retroactively. If you stop claiming, if you know, a lot of people rely on a little piece of information and then they give up immediately and quit claiming, but then it gets resolved a month or two later. It's harder to go back and try to claim for all those weeks.
Correct. Great advice. Okay, just one quick clarification on state extension for regular UI. Do we anticipate that those will also be extended for the additional weeks, similar to the federal pandemic assistance?
So, well, there are two extensions. There's the federal extended benefits PEUC, and then there's extended benefits on top of that. That's an existing program that's always been half funded by the feds. So that continues to be available for potentially right now 13 weeks, potentially 20 weeks, if unemployment continues to rise, which I suspect that it will. So we'll see if that changes right now, but it's 13 weeks right now.
Great, thank you, Anne. If leftover PEUC is not carried over, should the claimant then apply for extended benefits?
Yes, that is the next in line in the order of entitlement. So in order to get to PUA, first you have to be denied regular benefits. Then you have to be not eligible for PEUC. Then you have to be not eligible for extended benefits either. Then you might get to PUA if, for example, you're not eligible for training benefits. There's several state programs you have to be not eligible for in order to get to PUA.
Great, thank you. There's no additional questions in the Q&A box right now. So please pop your questions in there. We will hold on for a few more minutes to try to answer. Go ahead, John.
I would like to ask something about waivers. The concept of waiver has been around for quite a while, and it's not just unemployment where there is a possibility of waivers. Other benefit programs like Social Security or TANF, you know, it's a principle of fairness and equity that if you're not at fault in obtaining the benefits, and it would be a hardship to repay, you know, it may be waived. It's gotten very complicated over the years due to different categories of overpayments. Obviously, if someone was engaged in fraud, of course, they would not be allowed to have that overpayment waived. That's one example. It can be a complicated issue, but the idea behind it is that you provided basically correct information. So, you know, we see this post-pandemic with these complicated systems. I mean, who can keep all this straight? PUA, PEUC, PUC, you know, and what you're applying for. And again, a lot of people were in the wrong program. They should have been in one instead of the other, but that's not your fault because you're applying for benefits and answering the questions correctly. And by correctly, I don't mean perfectly. Of course, people might be off, you know, a day, like when did your job end, and maybe it was a Friday but you wrote Saturday. Things like that don't matter, but you know, generally that you're not at fault. And it goes back to a legal principle and equity about having clean hands. They use that expression, clean hands, in the transaction. And so to have people pay back money that they used to survive in the last few months would create an incredible hardship, especially since these overpayments go to collections and they add interest, and they can garnish future wages or bank accounts or their tax returns, and also put liens on property. So if you get overpayment notices, it's important to file for appeals right away. Read them carefully. You don't really have to make a legal argument when you file an appeal, but just get that in a timely manner. Ask for a hearing with the judge.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that the federal inclusion of this, lifting the ban on waiver for PUA is really promising, but it still leaves it up to the state. And Washington State is one of the states that has a fairly high bar to meet traditionally. Now that could change, under the current circumstances, but right now, only 3% of overpayments in Washington State are being waived. That's the most recent number. It's a very low number. A lot of people find themselves to be considered at fault for, as John was saying, things that may not even seem that an oversight. And if you're considered at fault, then financial hardship will not let you get the waiver. You will be denied it.
And there's a number of reasons why people don't get waivers. One, it's a category that isn't eligible for waiver, but often people don't get or read the waiver form that's sent to them. Either it's sent on the portal, they don't see it, or they don't fill it out. And then there are a few cases I've seen, just a few, where people do have a lot of income. I mean, if your overpayment is for $1,000 and you have $50,000 in your savings account, you're probably not going to get a waiver, just unless there are other extraordinary circumstances.
Right, excellent. I would also add that if you are calling ESD to have a stay on your overpayment, to have them put it on hold, you need to have appealed the decision first. ESD will ask you if you have appealed the overpayment decision. You want to appeal it, reply yes, and then you can request a hold. If you are late in filing your appeal, that could hinder ESD from giving you the hold or allowing you to have a stay, in which case you would want to talk with ESD about lowering your repayment options, creating a payment plan, and getting that in motion to whatever extent you're financially able, so that there is no risk of going to collections or any other negative effects from the overpayment, all while still having your appeal be pending. So all of that information is contained in our chat box. And if you have any further questions, you can certainly reach out to our office for assistance. A couple more questions. When benefits end, does ESD send you alerts that one should fill out extension questions, or does ESD just stop sending you alerts regarding your benefits in general? Do we know?
I don't know.
No.
Have you ever seen anything about these alerts? I mean, we have a lot of problems with the alerts. The classic one being potential new claims. That certainly doesn't sound like an emergency, but it really was an emergency. So I don't know. I've heard people say that they got some notice that they were going to their claim is going to be exhausted, but I'm not sure that that's a regular thing. I just don't know.
Yes, I don't know either. Check your e-services account. If you believe you still have more time, then send a message through your ESD e-services account and try calling a representative to find out what's been happening, why you're no longer receiving alerts.
Just one note on sending a message. ESD told us that they literally do not have time to answer messages, so they're not recommending that as a recourse. They advise calling their phone lines.
Yes.
Very unfortunate.
Thank you, Anne. All of the links are still in our chat box, so you can find them there. They will remain there while this webinar is still on. So if you need them, I don't need to resend them. They are located in the chat box right there. You can find them. Let's see. Okay, just for clarification, someone who is applying for UI, answering the questions of able and available. If the individual could work, except for COVID reason, are they to answer yes?
So if you're applying for regular UI, you should say you're not available, because for regular UI, you are not available. When you're actually in the PUA application, then a different standard applies for answering that question. And there is there's a page on the ESD site that's called PUA guidelines, something like that. We can try to find that page. But if you search on PUA on the ESD site, it will give you, there's a page giving guidelines on what the questions actually mean and how you should frame your answer. It's unfortunate that plain English is not really the basis for this, but you want to be sure you answer the questions the way they're asking, they're hoping that they'll be answered.
Great, thanks, Anne. I did just drop that link, PUA guidance eligibility questions. That link is now in the chat box. Okay, last week it was mentioned that the Department of Labor was going to have claimants answer questions or do something special to prove that they were actually supposed to receive funds. Is there any more information on that? They believe that this was going to be for claimants who did not have to wait a week.
So the Department of Labor wouldn't be communicating directly with claimants. This would be through a Department of Labor requirement enforced by Employment Security Department. And the weekly claims questions have made these, I think, met these requirements, unless there's something else the questionnaire is asking about.
Yes, I'm not sure what they're referring to, but I would maybe look at the Department of Labor website and see if there's any updated information there. Okay, we have a claimant who is concerned that they may not be having enough money taken out for income taxes as they've looked through their past year. How can they send extra money to the Department of IRS to keep from having a fine for not paying enough?
Well, that's not too hard. You can go to the IRS webpage. I think it's irs.gov, and you can find instructions there for how to submit dollars to apply towards your taxes.
Great. I would also recommend reaching out to a CPA or your accountant for more specific guidance on tax filing and tax information. Okay.
There's a site called EFTPS. So payments on your tax account are made electronically now. So it's EFTPS.gov, and that's how people, you can go in there, open an account, and you can make a payment towards whatever your Social Security number is with the IRS.
Great. Thank you, Anne. I have now just dropped that link in our chat box as well. Okay, we have a claimant who said they should be on PUA, but ESD has yanked that option and they are not qualified for UI, but that's the only place that they can file. And that's all they say. My recommendation is file for UI. And if ESD denies you, file an appeal for the denial promptly within the 30-day time limit. And if the option then arises for you to either apply for PEUC or PUA, apply for those. And when you receive your notice of hearing from the Office of Administrative Hearing after your appeal, which may likely take 3 to 4 months, you can contact the Unemployment Law Project and we will assign you a representative to assist you for your hearing. But I would first recommend apply for UI and be denied, and then you may have the option to reapply for PUA. I would also recommend calling ESD to get a representative on the phone who can specifically look at your account and answer any individual questions.
Yes, that's right. And when you appeal, that does not cut off your right to call the representatives and try to straighten things out. So don't abandon that option if you have an hour or two to spare.
Correct. There is a question for clarification. Is PUA money taxable?
Yes. All unemployment benefits are taxable by the IRS. Okay, that's all the questions we have for now.
So I think we will wrap up for this year. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us this year, for muddling through the chaos and turmoil along with us. Thank you for providing us with your questions. They enable us to provide directed guidance to hundreds of people like you. Please look at our website for additional information, for contact information. We wish you all safe and happy holidays and a healthy and prosperous new year for everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again on Monday, January 4th. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.